Group 5, which consists of Trayvon Wood, Jade Russell, Alexis Williams, Ciara Sayers, Sharon Cornish, Crystal Clark, and myself, Madrevi McAfee, will be focusing on Chapter 8 of The Virtue of Selfishness, titled, How Does One Lead a Rational Life in an Irrational Society? In Chapter 8 of the 1964 compilation of essays titled The Virtue of Selfishness, predominantly written by philosopher Ayn Rand, the question, how does one lead a rational life in an irrational society, is presented. Rand responds to this question by emphasizing the principle that one must never fail to pronounce moral judgment. Rand explains that to live a normal life, one must at least be reasonable. Having moral agnosticism, perception condemns individuals because from their viewpoint, an action is seen either morally permissible or morally impermissible.
In this critique, we will be evaluating Rand's belief that in order to be a judge, one must have and uphold an untarnished character and moral value, and possess the ability to express one's standpoint when necessary. We agree with Rand's perspective pertaining to moral judgment and the importance of moral values. A person's character is the leading force of how they perceive the world. For a person to pronounce moral judgment, they must have flawless character traits, which is unheard of. Either way, a person cannot avoid making decisions, therefore they cannot escape from moral values. As a result, moral neutrality is impossible.
In Ayn Rand's essay titled How Does One Lead a Rational Life in an Irrational Society, Rand condemns society for taking on an attitude of moral neutrality, which is an impossible stance that one can take, as everyone must and is always making a moral judgment. Rand makes it clear that one must never fail to make moral judgments, but the destructive idea of moral agnosticism, which is the idea that one should not pass moral judgment and be tolerant of everything, is what is destroying our characters and culture. Such an idea is irrational, and by not passing on moral judgment, no justice is carried out in our society. One's being or moral character can be judged on the actions of approval and disapproval. However, it is the fear of being judged by others that result in people not wanting to make moral judgments at all. Thus, they would rather take a stance of moral neutrality. This then results in no one benefiting, since no moral judgment was made to help anyone. Moral neutrality is an unrealistic stance for any person to take because as human beings, we are faced with daily moral decisions. Withholding a moral standpoint could possibly create a domino effect in life, such as a man's irrational actions resulting in an irrational society, or his rational actions contributing to a more rational society.
Rand presents various views on how a rational society has become. This results in many people not even wanting to have moral judgments, which is impossible because as humans it's natural for us to have views and opinions on things. The same kind of mentality can also be very harmful to society as well. One of the arguments stated by Rand is that society has adopted this attitude of judge not and you will not be judged. In essence, it's basically saying that if we do not have moral judgments or this kind of moral standards that we try to place on others, then they won't try to judge us in return. So by doing this, most of us would be staying moral neutral because we wouldn't be saying our opinions or giving judgments or any kind of view. Another point that was made is that everyone must always make a choice. So it's impossible to say that we are going to be morally neutral. In any decision or kind of view that we take, there is going to be some kind of moral stance towards it. So an analogy can be made as if you see somebody who is doing something bad to a person, they're hurting them or they're harming them. If you're not saying anything or you're not trying to condemn that person to say that is wrong, then you become a part of the problem as well by trying to stay morally neutral. Additionally, cultural relativism was also highlighted in the essay. It exemplified how we may have moral judgments, but we can have these judgments in a respectful manner when others may have conflicting opinions, maybe on a cultural way or just in how we live in our society.
Good day, everyone. My name is Sharon Cornish. How does one lead a rational life in a irrational society? Firstly, the question asks, how does one lead a rational life? In order to cope with a rational life, one must have the ability to cope with irrationals. One must be able to accept the things that he or she cannot change, have the courage to change things, and have the wisdom to know the difference. The reading focused on the importance of moral evaluation. She points out, and I agree, that moral values are a motive power in our lives that generates our emotions and inspire us. In this context, Ayn Rand claims that it is easy to become agonistic, which means a person who holds the view that any ultimate reality is unknown and probably unknowable, and not have a care in this world. However, the author is saying that one must care and extinguish what is evil and why to preserve our values. There are two aspects of this writing. You should be passing moral judgment to protect your mind, and if you don't, you are abstaining from condemning evil, which means that you're helping evil. That is, if you refuse to condemn a torturer, you are accessory to that torture. Or if you refuse to pass judgment on something evil going on in the world, then you're giving approval. One should not impose your own values elsewhere as if you know best. A rational life depends on nothing except the reason of determining the actions and no belief in anything seen or untouched. A life should not be guided by emotions and no actions that are unaware. Ethical principle used in the writing, she used relativism in the piece by stating that the burden of proof is based on the person making the judgment. You cannot say if something is wrong or right. What is right in one's own culture may be wrong in another, and there is no absolute truth of the matter. One should not impose your own values elsewhere as if you know best. There are topics you shouldn't go around. If you're talking to a certain group of people, because imposing your belief would consider passing judgment. Instead, you should get what you can productively out of that conversation. Keeping moral judgment should be kept to yourself under certain circumstances. No one owes everyone the truth. You have no obligation to share the content of your mind with anyone except under certain limited circumstances. So, if one does not believe it, it's just appropriate to say, I disagree. She emanates perceiving our values and focus on positive values. She focused ideally on moral judgment, keeping our value mechanism intact and alive, and that is more important than any factor. Thank you.
In the critique, in paragraph 4 states that, but to pronounce moral judgment is an enormous responsibility. To be a judge, one must possess an unimpeachable character. One need not to be omniscient or infallible. It is not an issue of errors of knowledge. One needs an unblemished integrity. That is the absence of any indulgence in conscience, willful evil. I agree with the author because if you want to judge someone else's wrongdoings, make sure that you are not making the same mistakes. However, not just because someone isn't perfect doesn't mean that they shouldn't stand up for what is right. No one has an unimpeachable character or unblemished integrity. However, that doesn't mean that they should let injustice and immorality take over. If people allow to be perfect to stand up for what is right, then there will be no one to condemn immorality. This is a form of the ethical principle of beneficence because it promotes the right decision and doing the right action. And paragraph 5 states that it is his own moral character and standards that he reveals when he blames or praises. I agree with the author with this view. In order to know a person's character, it is good to listen to what he praises. If he praises and glorifies things of good morality, such as being kind to another person or going to church every week, then the person has good morals. However, if he promotes and praises things of bad morality, such as stealing and fighting, then he has bad morality. This is the ethical principle of virtue, because it focuses on a person's character. And paragraph 6 states that it is the fear of this responsibility that prompts most people to adopt an attitude of indiscriminate moral neutrality. And quote, "Judge not that ye be not judged." I agree with the author about moral neutrality because majority of people are too afraid to stand for the right things when an injustice is being done, because they are afraid of being judged or condemned, so they remain silent. This is a form of deontology because it requires people to make the right decision. And paragraph 7 states that there's no escape that men have to make moral choices. So as long as they make moral choices, there's no escape from moral values. I agree with this term from the author, that there's no escape from moral values, because every day people have to make moral choices or making the right or wrong decisions. So hence, moral neutrality cannot exist. This is a form of autonomy because everyone has a right to make their own personal decisions, whether it is moral or immoral. And the last two paragraphs states that an irrational society is a society of moral cowards, of men paralyzed by the laws of moral standards and principles and goals. I agree with this statement by the author. In order for a society to have high moral standards, the men need to have backbone and stand for what is right. Irrational men create an irrational society, and rational men create a rational society. If men are afraid to stand for uprightness and correct doings in society, then it will be overturned by immorality and wrongdoings eventually. On the other hand, if men stand for uprightness and good morality, then the society will have a strong morality. This is a form of the theory of least harm, because if the society have moral cowards, then society will be more dangerous. But if society have moral men, then the society will be a safer place.
An individual must not fail to make a moral judgment, but ensure that that judgment is made responsibly. Listening to the things individuals praise determines that individual's character. If one praises things of good morality, then that person has good morals. On the other hand, if one praises things of bad morality, then that person has bad morals. Rad expresses that taking the stance of moral neutrality is an unrealistic stance. Most individuals fail to make a moral judgment to stand up for what is right because they are afraid to be judged or criticized. However, the deontological theory requires individuals to make right decisions regardless of consequences. Moral judgment cannot be escaped, because people are required to make right or wrong decisions daily. It is impossible to remain neutral towards every decision in life. Rad stated that an irrational society is a society of moral cowards. Irrational men creates an irrational society, and rational men creates a rational society. If society has moral cowards, then this will cause harm to society. But if society has moral men, then society will be safe. Everyone should make a moral judgment responsibly because it indeed makes a difference in society.